Hey there, this is the One Boom, and this video is bound to cause a little controversy in the comments section, but don't worry. Some of the things I'm about to talk about are from a perspective you just might not have. I've thought about this long and hard, and while sometimes I feel like I say things that you could perceive as wrong or incorrect or spicy, I feel like I'm just talking about something a lot of you aren't going to relate to in this video. So while it seems really pretentious to start a video by saying, don't worry guys, I'm not wrong, I really don't feel like I am. I feel like Call of Duty is letting down a large portion of its player base, and I don't think they absolutely mean to. I do think that somebody over there, especially at Infinity Ward, is trying to appeal to this fan base with game modes like realism in Modern Warfare 2019 and Tier 1 mode in Modern Warfare 2. But it has to be said, the hardcore player base, the player base that's a little bit less into CDL skins and jump shotting and a little bit more into tactical loadouts that are realistically themed, more methodical gameplay, they're not being catered to as much. And I got this idea while on stream when somebody was talking about how there should be some type of tactical game mode. I think the user was OK Camper, somebody who's a regular in my stream chats. By the way, hit the bell icon to get notified when I go live. I live stream on this channel. What he was saying though is that there should be some sort of tactical game mode, and I fully agree. In fact, the last 3 Infinity Ward CODs have tried this. Infinite Warfare had a mode called Tactical, and then we had, like I said, Realism, and then we have Tier 1. And I thought, well, what's the next step? Maybe they should really do a forced loadout, forced proximity chat, realism game mode, just to see how it does. I think it should feature 6v6, 10v10, and ground war styles, and just hear me out. Imagine a Call of Duty game mode where your movement speed is slightly lowered, sprint is limited and a little bit clunkier, your character runs out of stamina after a single jump, so jumping is just to jump over something, not to jump around corners. All of the rest of Call of Duty's smoothness is maintained, except for the fact that you cannot aim down sight while proning and standing up, so you are forced to leave your sights when proning and standing up, just to nerf drop shotting a little bit. So we take the movement shooter aspects of Call of Duty out, we take those, juking movements out, and we just replace them with just a little bit slower, a little bit more subdued movement. Then you have forced loadouts. I think this game mode should have its own customization, but it's faction-based. If you are on one faction, you use weapons like, well, just make this simple, the Kastov 7.62. The other faction uses the M4. And you customize what M4 you'd want to use, and you customize what Kastov you'd want to use, but if you're on one faction, you have to use a Kastov, and if you're on the other faction, you have to have an M4. Both teams would have access to different weapons, and I think this would be really interesting. Basically similar to Insurgency or Battlefield, where certain classes have different loadouts, or Insurgency, different factions have different loadouts. You would customize what you'd want your Insurgent style loadout to be and what you'd want your Security Force style loadout to be. If you've played Insurgency, that makes total sense. If not, it went right over your head. But basically, one team gets one set of guns, the other team gets another set of guns, just to make it a little bit more interesting. I think there should be a couple universal weapons, but for the most part, make it a little stricter than normal. This is not your daddy's Call of Duty game. This is supposed to be different. Then I say any HUD element that isn't essential is stripped away, and you can only see how much ammo you have left in your magazines by holding the X button away from an interaction prompt to check your magazine. Or maybe make it so that you have to do a weapon inspect to see how much ammo you have. That'd be pretty cool too. Then we get rid of perks entirely. No ghost, no focus, no fast hands, no spotter, no perks whatsoever. I'd also say replace kill streaks with UAV towers similar to what we see on the Warzone map in the Sheikah Island, where you go up to a tower, your character presses in some buttons, and then your team gets a UAV for a little bit. I think that'd be kind of fun to have those activate halfway through a game, so you can kind of fight for UAV towers, or maybe even fight for the ability to call in an airstrike. But honestly, no kill streaks is also just fine. We want this to be slower, less hectic. We don't want VTOLs and chopper gunners and people coming in here to rack up streaks. We want a system where the players that enter it are not going to go, well, I'm gonna screw with some milsim fans and use a sweaty CDL loadout and rack up easy kill streaks on LARPers. We want them to be discouraged from joining this playlist. We want this to be very boring to the people that would find it boring, and very enticing to the people that find it enticing. Then I believe there should be a gear and armor system. Basically, every character would have an armor plate on their chest, and a helmet. When the helmet is broken, similar to Infinite Warfare's realism mode, you either have to go find a new one out of an ammo box or a supply box of some kind, or the next shot that hits you in the head is going to kill you. And this only really counts at a distance. Let's say past 50 meters, the bullet can be stopped by the helmet, but then the next bullet will kill you. And the same for your body. I think after about 50 meters, 1 or 2 shots should break your chest carrier, and that would work just fine. Basically, you'd be protected from getting melted by upper chest shots and headshots, because Call of Duty guns, even in this game, are very intuitive. You don't want somebody just mounting a 60-round M4, getting a bunch of one-shot kills. You want them to have to work for it a little bit, and if they're fighting outside of their effective range, they're not going to be able to break your helmet in one shot, and they're going to have to land a follow-up shot on your head. And this is fairly realistic. If you catch a 5.56 round in your plate carrier, from about 50 meters, you're probably not going to just instantly explode and combust. I know a lot of hardcore Call of Duty players that just play hardcore mode because it's more realistic, think that the human body getting shot in the leg with a 45 is just going to explode and just you're dead, reduced to ashes. Not true. I've seen enough helmet cam footage of soldiers taking rounds to the helmet and surviving that it's like, yeah, I think it should concuss me a little bit, but then it's like, okay, my helmet's broke, I need to get the fuck down and hold cover. I think this would make it so the game's not too melty, but is still a much more consistent TTK overall. Basically, you fight outside your effective range, it's gonna suck. But, if you have a RAL MG or a Signal 50, then good night, Gracie. You're not surviving a 338 Lapua Magnum round to the head. I don't care how cool your helmet is. And then, if you are not killed with a headshot, I believe you should be downed for about 10 seconds before bleeding out and dying. And of course, just like realism mode, there wouldn't be a lot of HUD, but I do think there should be some exaggerated blood splatters, so when you start getting kills at a distance, you can see that you really took somebody out. That's basically how Insurgency Sandstorm does it. I think that'd work really well here. I'm taking the ideas of tactical mode from Infinite Warfare, where the movement is more limited to slow players down. Then I'm taking the realism Infinite Warfare campaign idea of your helmet breaking and then you being susceptible to headshots. Then, of course, the Modern Warfare realism idea where your HUD is completely removed. The Warzone idea of having an armor plate that you can, go find more of, but of course you only wear one at a time. And then the Tier 1 idea of just being a little bit squishier at your body as well. Because if you don't know, Tier 1 wasn't just like realism. It wasn't just one-shot headshots. It also drained your health to about 50%. But imagine if somebody had a single plate of armor, a helmet, 50 health. The time to kill is not going to be blazing fast, but it's also not going to be terribly slow. I think that'd be a really good balanced system. And we've seen stuff like this before, guys. Like the classic game mode back in COD 4 and in MWR changed your movement. You could jump higher, I believe. It was a little bit more floaty. Like Call of Duty's played with these ideas before, like having on-site procurement weapons in multiplayer, like with Advanced Warfare. Advanced Warfare and Infinite Warfare had literal game modes that took away the advanced movement, so you'd have to use ladders and staircases. And Modern Warfare 3's, I believe, Money in the Dank game mode made it AKs versus M4s, so you'd fight like a PKP with an M249, and so it was like very, Russians versus Americans, and they could do that again. The last thing that's really obvious is that it would be milsim skins only. So only the milsim skins you have would be applicable here, and I think, again, nobody's gonna complain about that. And this game mode probably wouldn't be the most populated, but my God, I mean, Tier 1 wasn't very populated, realism wasn't very populated, gunfight's not the most popular thing on the planet. It's like Call of Duty will spread itself really thin with Fireteam Dirty Bomb and Ground War and Invasion and Gunfight, and then you have Ranked Play, and then you have Warzone and everything, and 10v10, and then Vanguard had different combat pacings, and all the different game modes in those combat pacings. Like, Call of Duty's not scared of splitting its player base, so I don't really have any arguments against this. This is literally something that would appeal to a select amount of players, because this is the smoking gun of my argument. It is very obvious to me by how many complaints I see that Call of Duty, especially Infinity Ward, has the attention of a more hardcore milsim audience, but they do nothing with it. And when I go play hardcore mode, I see people crouching around corners and wearing milsim skins and playing a lot more cautiously. They're not just camo grinding. There's people in hardcore mode that are trying to play it like a milsim, and I'm like, why don't they just make an actual milsim mode? No more half measures like realism or Tier 1, actually go all in. And then if you want to capitalize on sales, just put more milsim stuff in the game, more tactical theme stuff in the game, in the store, because then they'll go buy it because they can use all those milsim games in this tactical game mode I'm describing. And again, like doing this on a map like Dome in like 4v4, or doing it on something like the Hillmet Expo in 10v10, doing it on some of the Invasion Ground War maps, that'd be great. Like imagine playing Ground War with no kill streaks, slower movement, and this whole health and body system that I'm talking about. Now, this game already has a spotting and pinging system, so callouts are going to be helpful and useful. Instead of a compass and UAVs going off constantly, it would be people like flanking and then spotting enemies for their team. It wouldn't really be about progression, although of course you would still level up and be able to progress towards certain camos and things. But for the most part, it would be just a much more grounded, hardcore experience. The only thing I think to preserve this aesthetic that they'd have to do that they don't want to do is remove the option of using variants, all variants. That way, anything with like a tracer or a death effect is no longer applicable. No anime guns. And then maybe they'll just, in that menu, in this separate menu for this game mode, they would remove the option to apply camos, because again, for a realism tactical mode, pink camos and lime green camos and gold camos and polyatomic camos, you know, they're gonna kind of hurt the aesthetic a little bit. And that's what this is all about. It's for the people that want that tactical military aesthetic, that slower pace, that more realistic version of COD. And I know a lot of you don't realize that I am talking about ideas that have been in COD before. I am not inventing any of this out of my ass. Again, Infinite Warfare, Modern Warfare 3, Modern Warfare 2019, Modern Warfare 2, its fucking self, COD 4, MWR, Advanced Warfare. I mean, Ranked has its own menu with its own class making, and so does Spec Ops, and so does the Raid and everything, so like, fuck it. Just do more, Infinity Ward. Do more for this player base that wants that experience. And then having that kind of modifier in DMZ with like a day and night cycle, like God, you would absolutely sell out your server space for those players that want that experience. Big YouTubers like Operator Drewski would go try it out and give his feedback on it. Dedicate like a 10-man team to monitoring it and making sure it works and making sure it stays up to date and all the things are fixed and tweaked so that the movement's not too slow or too fast, and just really stay on it and just make something for those players. We saw people sticking with Modern Warfare 2019 when Cold War was out because of just the fact that Modern Warfare 2019 was more grounded and more quote-unquote realistic than Cold War. That fan base exists in Call of Duty. They love the intuitive, snappy gunplay of Call of Duty. They like that it's more optimized than a lot of the other milsim games, especially on console. They like that it's something that they've grown up with, but they just want it to take itself a little bit more seriously, and that's where this would. In the same way that Ranked is its own thing, so would Tactical. I definitely wouldn't play it all the time, but I would love it as a change of pace. And I'll also point out, I really wanted them to do this in Vanguard because Vanguard was very silly with its enemy team versus your team nonsense and all that. I really wanted a faction-locked weapon setup for Vanguard, where if you load in, you know, you play, if you're on the Russian map, it's Russians versus Germans. If you are in the Pacific, it is Japanese versus Americans, something like that. And then you would have your weapons tied to that faction. So you'd have to, you know, only use Japanese guns or American weapons, no attachments, bare bones, just a bare bones, no perks, no attachments, very Call of Duty 2-esque style multiplayer. And of course it didn't happen, and I really hated that. This video is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but I'm realizing as I'm talking about this that this should have existed a long, long time ago, and I think it's time to pursue this now. Call of Duty, you don't have a lot of competition in the AAA market at the moment, and nothing is taking up that milsim space. Actual real milsim hardcore games are just a little bit harder to get into. They're a little bit more niche, and a lot of them are only on PC. And games like Insurgency Sandstorm on console, it isn't bad, but if you're on last gen, it is. So it is, but it's still just not well optimized or updated. They don't have the resources for it. Activision, Infinity Ward, you have the resources for this. This would take nothing away from the base game. It would just be a different rule set and a different menu with different class customization, and that's it. So you'd have public match and ranked and tactical. Like, I don't see a problem here. I know it's more dev time and more money, and a lot of you are gonna hit me with a really pessimistic, yeah, boom, but they don't care. Yeah, but they should. And that's what this video is about. Obviously they don't. Obviously they haven't been prioritizing this. I'm not blind. It's just, that's not an excuse for me to just be quiet about it. It's the jobs of my channel and channels like mine to get these sort of ideas flowing. If I didn't constantly see an outcry from fans of more realistic military things, then I would be quiet. But That's not how it goes. There are people that are really into that style of game that are coming to Call of Duty and getting half of what they really want. In the same way that competitive players that want a ranked mode are really enjoying Modern Warfare 2's ranked mode, like, these realism players should have that too. I don't see why not. So that's the end of this video, that's the end of this rant. Yeah, 15 minutes long, but fun video to end the month with. I'll see you when I see you guys. Goodbye.